And today we are turning green, and sadly, it's not St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, the green-eyed monster. We are green with envy.
Yeah, and when I looked that up, because I wanted to know where the origins of that was, where the green with envy comes from. And apparently it's a Shakespearean reference. He used to use the color green to represent envy.
Or jealousy, maybe, was it?
Yeah, probably. Now, there is a differentiation between the two.
We'll come to that in a moment. And actually, of course, I had to do a little bit of research too. In fact, the ancient Greeks believed that it was all got to do with bodily fluids, and that basically, of course, if you were a very envious person, or you had a lot of that, negative, your body was full of bile.
Ah, right.
And the bile was a bluish green color.
Your discharge. Lovely.
Yes. Basically, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're all pretty familiar with the concept of envy, and I believe it's part of the human condition to have that social comparison, to compare yourself with other people. And I think we're all familiar with terms like keeping up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Kardashians.
Oh, yeah.
The updated version of that.
Yeah, hard to do. Or well gel, the whole well jealous, so to speak.
Where does that come from?
I think it was an Only Way is Essex reference.
Okay.
Just people being jealous of other people.
So this is a good point now then let's differentiate between the two, because they often get mixed up. And of course we have to go back to Brené Brown for our definitions.
Yes.
And that's the heart, Atlas of the Heart.
Yeah, and she describes envy as envy occurs when we want something another person has. But then jealousy is when we fear losing a relationship or valued part of a relationship that we already have.
And just to break that down even further, in my mind, the way I see the difference between the two is envy is that you want what somebody else has, okay? And jealousy is you want to hold tight to what you have. That's the difference.
Yeah. And you might be familiar with the movie Seven. It's an old Brad Pitt movie, which is about the 7 deadly sins. And the final one in that movie being envy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I grew up, in the Christian tradition, in Catholicism, where it was definitely a deadly sin. And it's interesting when I think back on envy, there wasn't, it wasn't something that we talked about a lot, actually. Not that we talked about any feelings, but it's not something I have much strong memory of. And I think that's because it was considered, I have this memory from the Bible of something like, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. I mean, this is probably not correct, okay? Because
Sounds about right.
I'm not an expert on the Bible, but somehow that stayed with me. So there's definitely a sense of, when you were saying we're all familiar with the concept of envy, I would say yes, but I don't think that we would take ownership of the feeling. I feel envious. Do you hear people saying that very often? Yeah,
if people say it, they don't, they almost say it in a kind of, I don't know if it's a joking way, but you wouldn't hear it out loud very often, right?
I think it's quite shameful because of the deadly sins. Do you have something similar in Hinduism? Yeah,
there's the classic story, the Mahabharata, and there is the whole, essentially the story is there's a massive giant war which has started because of envy. This Duryodhana, and he's envious of the 5 Pandava princes, of their lifestyle essentially, and goes to war over it.
Ooh, lifestyle envy way back.
From the ages.
Long before social media.
Yes.
When I grew up in Westmeath, there's an amazing old, you've actually been there, Anirban. It's like a beautiful park and a house, Belvedere Park and Gardens, really a manor house. And they have in there the jealous wall. So we would go there on school trips, and it's this huge wall that was built. Again, I can't remember the relationship, but it's something got to do with, again, like she was saying, so, he is jealous of their relationship. I think it's like his wife's relationship with his brother or something. Those kind of love triangles where jealousy often comes into play in storytelling and film.
Sure.
So I think it's good for us to kind of extrapolate the two from each other, and that we're focusing on envy. So as we go forward, this feeling that I want what you have, that's the feeling that we're focusing on today.
And really, it's about that wall being put up so that you can't see what's going on the other side, right? Because what you see is what makes or creates that jealousy in your mind.
Yes, it's the eyes.
It's the visuals. It's from the eyes, yeah.
And you have in some cultures like the evil eye or jealous eye. There's definitely something that comes back to that. And of course, you have Dante in the Divine Comedy. Don't you have that part where their eyes are sewn up?
Brilliant reference, yeah.
Yeah, like the eyelids are sewn shut with iron threads. Those
brutal.
The envious. I mean, again, this is probably religious. But those envious people, are they in hell? I mean, they are. It's Dante. They're in hell, right?
Yes. And if we bring that into modern times, where are we at with social media? It's all about the eyeballs, right? It's that attention economy that's everyone's trying to get a piece of.
Yeah, comparison. And Brené Brown, that whole chapter is about comparison. She says comparison is the crush of conformity from one side and competition from the other. It's trying to simultaneously fit in and stand out. Comparison, if it could speak, would say, be like everybody else, but better.
Oh God, yeah. And that is social media all over, right? It's so hard not to compare yourself and to see all these amazing curated images and want to have a piece of it. It brings up those emotions of envy.
Yeah, you've got envy for everything. I think you've food envy, you've parenting envy, you've lifestyle envy, holiday envy,
kitchen envy.
What hashtag relationship goals, relationship envy.
Oh God, the list goes on. It can be over anything, really, anything that you potentially don't have.
Are we living in the age of envy? Because I saw an article in The Guardian, brilliant article actually, by Moya Starner. And it was really talking about, there's never been so much envy because of socials, right? And there was some amazing stats that she had in there about social media. And, I've talked about this before. I came away from social media 5 years ago because I wasn't really happy with how it impacted my mental health or the mental health of my child or anyone else. And what I thought was really interesting in some of the research and the studies that she cites in her article was how the voyeurs, the people who are on socials, particularly Facebook, I think the study was done on,
right.
And they are not actively interacting with anybody. They're just looking. We're back to the eye, the voyeur.
Yep.
They're looking. They had to rate their envy. And so actually the most toxic place to be is the voyeur.
Right.
Because you're not engaging. You're not even doing a thumbs up or thumbs down. You're just watching. And you're almost like absorbing everybody else's, highlight reels, as are now called on Insta. And that was so interesting, the correlation between being a voyeur and actually feeling very envious.
Yes. And does that also lead to sort of feeling down, like depression?
I'm not sure about that. Right. However, I will quote something she said, which I think is actually brilliant. We carry our envy amplification device around in our pockets. We sleep with it next to our pillows and it tempts us 24 hours a day, the moment we wake up, even if it's in the middle of the night. So what's she referring to there?
Oh God, yeah.
Our phones.
Our lovely phones.
So this really chimes in with what we believe in on our program, Dethrone Your Phone.
Dethrone it.
Because I do think that I think we already feel envy. It is the human condition. It is normal to have some envy. Though if you are putting your eyeballs in front of thousands of images of beautiful houses, beautiful people, beautiful bodies, is that amplifying it? And I think, yes, right?
It can't fail to. You've got so many images, and it certainly happened to me. I definitely had that vibe of, I need something else. I want to have that. I want to have this. I want to be in a different place.
Tell me more about your personal story on envy. Set me the scene. What year are we talking about now, Anirban?
Okay, so let's go back to when I was still on social media around 2015, 2016. I was working in social media. I worked for Adobe at the time. So, the Photoshop people. And I was really just on social media a lot for work reasons. But then also, obviously, I had a personal account. And I was following things like snowboarders, surfers, skateboarders. And I was
all the adventure sports.
Yeah, stuff I like. But really, I was thinking about, oh, wouldn't it be great? I felt like I wanted to be them, or I felt I wanted to have their lifestyle.
Like be a pro surfer. Is that what you mean?
I guess not. Obviously, I didn't think I was going to be a pro surfer, but these weren't pro surfers. These were probably people like me who had probably quit their jobs and decided to be a travel vlogger or, you know, some sort of nomad worker. It was a lifestyle I was craving, probably.
That's quite interesting because when you look into the research on envy, they say you actually don't envy the Kardashians or the super rich or the famous. You know I'm never going to be a supermodel.
That's right.
It's actually, you know, the people very similar to yourself in your own socioeconomic group, you know, people like you, your friends, your family.
Yeah, something achievable, attainable. You're not going to be a superstar, film star or whatever, right?
Yeah. So you're looking at, you know, kind of, you know, are we talking about men in their 30s?
Like I said, it was probably people of my sort of peer group who had left it all behind and had this idyllic lifestyle. Obviously, they're only showing the best bits, right?
Yeah, the highlight reel. But what's very interesting there is, you know, if we were to go back before social media, in your social group, do you actually know anyone who gave up their job and went off to be a nomad worker out of all the people you went to school with?
Zero.
Right. Okay. So that's what's interesting because people say to me, oh, social media doesn't make any difference. We always had magazines, TV and our social group. Yes. But I think what happens now is you can see the feeds from Australia, from Bali, from California.
Yeah.
Right.
You can connect with these people all over the world who you'll never meet.
They are showing a lifestyle that is part of an area of the world that they live in. We don't live in Bali. And my next question to you is, were you following any of the surfers that were based on the coasts of Ireland or England?
No chance.
Right, in freezing cold and lashing rain. Because it's huge now in Ireland, in Sligo. So were you know, the Sydney surfers versus the Sligo surfers, right? The Cornwall surfers versus, what's that place in Bali called?
Oh, yeah, Kangoo.
Kangoo versus Cornwall, Sydney versus Sligo. So what were you following?
I was following those slightly more tropical places, shall we say. The sunny paradise places. I had a massive sort of hankering for, wouldn't it be amazing if I was there?
Yeah, and that's that what if thinking, right? Everything will be better when if I ran off away. And you know, did you do a visualize where I think it's very interesting when we go into this idea of, you know, my life be great when this thing happened.
Yeah.
So what were you doing besides surfing in the morning? What's the rest of your day look like?
That's the thing. At the time, I hadn't done that exercise to think, you know, is that it? It wouldn't be obviously surfing 12 hours a day. I hadn't thought about the practicalities of life, you know, school for our daughter, even just like whatever, you know, where would you eat that day? What would your downtime involve? It just wasn't part of your train of thought because all my exposure would have been to these amazing images of, you know, the perfect waves and amazing sunsets and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah, and so you wonder a bit like when you have the, you know, the shots of food and beautiful dinners and beautiful kitchens. And, you know, they've done some of this stuff now where you pan back from the shot and it's a mess, right? It's like you were saying about Adobe and Adobe Photoshop. I feel like we've come full circle now. So when you were at the height of your envy was like, whatever, 2015, that, you know, there was a sense of, you know, the beauty of Instagram was real. And I think, you know, now how many years later where, you know, the idea of the Photoshopped image, the idea of the perfect life, I think we've really, you know, it's really been exposed.
Yeah, there's even the new app. I say new app; it's been around for a while. The Be Real app, where they try and get you to post the realness of your life at random times, so it's not, you know, a perfect shot necessarily.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to a point. I do. You know, from a psychology point of view, I am still very dubious about the point of posting at all.
That's
because
brilliant.
You're still seeking approval.
Yeah, why are you posting?
If you are just posting a regular photograph of you sitting at your desk at work, why do you need to post that? Why do you need people's approval?
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, and an awful lot of this humble brag, all of this type of stuff you see, particularly on LinkedIn, and I have to let everyone know my industry. It's quite interesting, I think, if you kind of pare back, what is the motivation behind it all?
Yeah.
Is it extrinsic motivation or intrinsic? And if I can just qualify what they mean, are you doing this because you personally have always wanted to reach the role of being, a CEO or a professor because you're so passionate about your industry that you just always wanted to be an educator and be in a university setting, that you wanted to rise right to the top of this business that you're so passionate about, that you absolutely love the financial markets, or that you're so engaged with food and you had to be at the top of your game? Or are you seeking approval and, the pat on the back from everyone?
Yep. Is it all about the likes?
Yeah.
Is it just getting approval from people you don't even know?
I watched a really good, a different kind of reel. It's called BBC Reel. And they have these really cool videos now that kind of go a little bit deeper on topics. And there's a guy on there called Dan John, and he has some great quotes from a psychologist called Koss, Kross. We'll put in the notes, but he calls them envy landmines.
Brilliant, yeah.
So you go on socials and you don't know what is going to erupt.
Yeah, what's gonna trigger your envy response.
And also that they are very harmful because they chip away at you. And I think this is what you're talking about, like little bit by little bit. One photo of a surfer, on the cover of a magazine that you saw in a doctor's surgery, back in the 90s or 2000s.
Brilliant.
One friend, somebody knew someone who knew somebody who gave up their life and went off traveling. That's what we were dealing with in the early 90s, 2000s. Now it's like thousands of images of all of these people who are apparently having a great life.
Yeah, it's the endless scroll. It'll just go on forever if you so choose.
And I think that's what we're saying, is that it's very hard. Envy is an emotion that we absolutely feel. It's, and actually I do want to come on to how there could be some good in envy, because there's good in every emotion. Mm-hmm. But what's really interesting here is, can you flood your system with all of this and be okay?
Well, from my personal experience, I can unequivocally say that no, you can't. This only ever brought me down. It just didn't make me feel good. I did flood my system. I was on it, probably hours a day. Who knows what my screen time was like back then. But I certainly felt down after looking at all these images.
And I think here we start to talk about self-esteem.
Yeah. And if I think about it, back then, I wasn't really in tune with my emotions back then. But if I were to use our feelings cheat sheet now, I certainly would have said I was probably disconnected at the time. Feeling
disconnected? Yeah. Or are you just not sure what you were feeling?
It's hard to say. I just wasn't, like I said, I wasn't in tune back then.
Yeah. And you're not connected to what you were doing, your purpose?
No, definitely not. I was just in an office job, and I didn't really feel a purpose other than, getting me paycheck type thing.
I know. And this is interesting because from the outside looking in, obviously we were together at this point. And so the impression I got off you was to work as much as you can, to earn as much money as you can, to go on these big holidays that would bring us into these parts of the world, okay?
Right, yeah.
And then to stay in kind of luxury resorts in these places. And so that would seem to be the whole motivation for 2 or 3 years, if not more. And, we did quite a bit of that, actually, to be honest. We fell into the trap that loads of people do, work a million hours.
Yeah, take your sort of 3 or 4 weeks holiday to some nice fancy places, right?
Yeah, very high-end hotels, all of that. But, I also can remember at that point that you were, when we would have the winters here, long winters in England, that you would, almost had, and actually I say almost, I mean, you were kind of suffering from SAD in the winter here. Do you remember?
Yeah, definitely. I had that for years. Always had a dip during the winter season.
Yeah.
And I never really sort of recognized it or would admit it, really. But it's something I've worked on and I certainly don't have it now. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think it's, season affective disorder. And so I think what's really interesting, I know you're coming on here and I know you're really, really honest, and it's hard in many ways for you to kind of untangle what was going on.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was unhappy in my life, in my working life.
Yes.
I looked online on these images and I was like, oh God, that's the answer. Okay. And then you follow down that route and you kind of follow on. Oh, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do. But you did that and you were still unhappy because ultimately to me, you're not getting to the root cause. And this nicely brings me on to, previous podcasts, we've talked about how anger, different than aggression, but anger as an emotion, I feel angry. It's when a boundary has been crossed. And the same envy is also part of the anger family. And it's normally telling you that something's wrong. Now, all emotions are like data. They are telling you some information that you need to know. So you were feeling those very strong feelings because there was something wrong. And, we now know years later what was wrong was your job. You weren't fulfilled in your job. Okay.
Yeah.
And so all the holidays in the world, to beautiful locations, we're not going to solve the issue because you were unfulfilled in your job.
That's right. And essentially, I just had to go deeper. I had to go inwards to figure out why. And one of the things I did, obviously, I spoke to you, and I did the course, the Science of Happiness course by Laurie Santos.
Where is that available from, Anirban? Harvard or out of Yale or one of those?
I think it's Yale.
Okay, yes.
Yale. It's just an online course, but it's amazing. It's all about the, I'll be happy when, and she goes through all the markers of earning a specific salary or, going on a big holiday, etc. And really, the great insight there is that once people achieve that or get those things, then they realize they're still not that happy. And really, I just sort of opened the door on my self-awareness journey. I had the knowledge, the science background there from doing that course. But really, to go deeper on my self-awareness is when I did the meditation. I got really deep on the meditation side, and that really helped grow my self-awareness.
Yeah, you learned to meditate personally. You went off. I actually remember you just got up one day and said you were going to do it.
Myself on a course.
What it seems like to be relatively out of the blue. But now here, as we unpack, and the whole idea that Anirban shares his authentic journey and his feelings, his lived experience, is to show how he's got to where he's got to. We're starting off with the feeling envy, and what does that mean? And there's this idea of benign envy, like I was saying, that it can actually be a messenger. So I'm unhappy. Okay, let me figure out what happiness is. I do an online course on happiness. Let me go deeper. And as you go deeper, you start to realize what exactly is going on with me.
Yeah, it was brilliant to sort of unpack it that way and go on that sort of self-discovery journey myself, and realize that, being on a beach surfing wasn't what I needed.
So really, we're back to the whole, myth busting and, taboo busting, basically, that I feel envy is absolutely an okay thing to say. I feel envious because it can actually be a little light bulb moment of what's going on with me, as it has been with you. And then it's interesting if we go back into culturally, we can talk a little bit now about Indian or Irish.
Yeah.
So
So definitely on my side, I definitely have heard, upbringing wise, my parents would have said, people feel jealous. Not I feel jealous. Like my mum would never say I feel jealous. She'd have said, oh, people are jealous of us.
How do you say that in Bengali?
Well, actually, what she'd say is jealousy te more jache, which means, oh, they're dying of jealousy.
Say that again, Anirban.
Jealousy te more jache.
Okay. And so give me your memory of when you can first remember your mother saying that, or a very strong memory of your mother saying that.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yes. I mean, this is it's a bit of a tough story to tell. Essentially, we had a massive rock thrown through one of our windows.
Hold on, one of our windows. Tell me, what do you mean one of our windows?
Our family home in Rochdale. And it was a huge rock. And it came flying in. We were all in bed, probably just going to sleep about 11 o'clock at night.
What year was this, Anirban?
I was a teenager. It was probably around 93, 94.
Okay.
I was about 15 or 16. And it was scary, to be honest. We lived on, a really kind of nice suburb in Rochdale. It's a place called Bamford. And we our house sort of backed onto a golf course, and there was a little alley right by the side of our house, which had no lighting actually. And this rock came in from that alleyway.
Okay, so tell me, and your mum said then when that happened?
Yeah, obviously we were super shocked. We called the police, and I asked, we just were talking, why did this happen? Who would have done this?
Mm-hmm. So I can see the distress on Anirban's face, and I feel like we're now moving away from maybe envy and jealousy, and we're getting into fear, and we're definitely going to cover fear, further down the line in these podcasts. So I'm going to come away from that story because I can see it's quite distressing for you, Anirban. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about the Irish context of envy and jealousy. Is trom an taid dá bhain ach an taid eile. So it's kind of like what you just said. E for the AD is actually the word for envy. Mm-hmm. And this saying alludes to, my envy is heavy, but your envy is even heavier.
Oh, right. Okay.
Or weightier. Mm-hmm. And so, what you said to me there now really made me think about that. So the weight of that rock that's somebody else's envy on you.
Oh, God. Yes.
So, there is a real nastiness to envy, and it can go really, really bad and deep. And what jumps into my mind now? It's that Angus Wilson quote, which is, envy has the ugliness of a trapped rat that has gnawed its own foot in its effort to escape.
Brilliant. What a brutal description of envy there.
And that's actually just for context, that's actually from, there was, again, more on the 7 deadly sins. We keep coming back to this, but it was Ian Fleming and Angus Wilson and a load of writers around that time who put together, they wrote about the 7 deadly sins, and he wrote about envy in much more detail. But that was the kind of standout quote for me, because it gets down to that darkness of envy.
And really, when you explore that, it's envy really stopping you feeling joy. And like to say, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes. My mum used to say that. Yeah. And so it stops you on 2 levels, because it stops you allowing you feel joy for other people. Yeah. What's that called? Schadenfreude, is it?
Schadenfreude. No, it's slightly different. Schadenfreude is slightly different. That's actually feeling joy when something bad happens to someone else. Slightly different. Yeah.
Okay, so I do think envy stops you from being happy about other people's good news, because you feel envious. Okay,
that's right.
And then the second thing it stops you from actually feeling good about your own life, right? Your own joys. So it's a double negative.
Yeah. There's certainly not much good from it. However, how can you then flip it so that you can use this information of you're getting envious feelings, and remember, all feelings are acceptable. How can we use that to our advantage?
Well, I think I was trying to think coming on here, when was the last time I felt envious? And again, to say I never felt envious is a complete lie. And I think growing up in a family of 4 kids, there was lots of envy. She got the bigger, piece of cake than me, right?
Yeah.
But then I started thinking about recently, and I remember having and I think I told you this afterwards.
Yeah, I remember.
Your dad was a while back now, because it wasn't 80. He was like in his 70s, 78 or whatever. And we were celebrating his birthday.
Oh, right, yes.
And my dad passed away when he was 76. So your dad had kind of outlived my dad at this point, okay?
Yeah.
And we went to celebrate the birthday, and it was lovely, actually. It was really beautiful time together. And I really felt envious. And it was, I think, for the first time, because I've been exploring now emotions and really getting into this emotional flexibility and feeling okay. And I told you, I feel envious of you because, my mum was sick at the time, very sick with Alzheimer's, and my dad had died. And so it was like, you have a family who, parents who, are there, you can celebrate with them. I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And I really felt envy. And I think it was what was so brilliant, again, very like anger. I was able to say to you, you didn't judge me because we did, the cheat sheet.
That's right.
And we did the feelings card.
Face to face.
And I felt so great. I almost felt relieved just to acknowledge that's what I was feeling. And so that's really, to me, the turnaround, Now, then, like anger, you can also decide what you do next with that. So I've gone deeper into my grief about my dad and about my mum, because she has since died too. And we're going to come to grief, actually, as a feeling. But it was a form of grief for my dad, you know, that envy. I wish that my dad was with me now. Yeah. And I've actually talked to a mum friend about this too, because both of us, our mothers have died and we still have young. She's got 2 kids. I've got 1, obviously we've got 1 together. And we often feel a yearning and an envy of other people who have grandparents around, you know.
Right,
we don't
you
have
see
that.
Grandparents in the playground at school pickup or something.
And so again, it's just, you know, oh, well, I'm still in the phase of grief. There's still some work to do. It'll come back. So again, it's all just little messages. And I think if you can sit with the message and write it down. If you don't have someone else to express it to, write down, you know, I feel envious, and then examine for what's going on with you right now. Why is it coming up?
That's right. Work on that self-awareness.
And I've just thought of Jon Kabat-Zinn. A great book by him is Full Catastrophe Living. His quote, which is really especially for you today, Anirban, is, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf.
Far out, man.
That's it. He's like the father of mindfulness.
He sure is.
You know, it's going to keep coming. These strong feelings are going to keep coming up on us. Anger, guilt, envy, jealousy. What are we going to do?
Yeah, and what I'm doing is riding out those emotions. I'm surfing the emotions, as it were, to use that analogy. Whatever it is, whatever comes up, all of the emotions are acceptable.
And you're becoming emotionally flexible.
Brilliant.
And that's what we hope for all of you listening. Really hope this has been helpful today.
And we hope you join us next week, where we'll be talking about joy.
We'll be blissed out.
Bye for now. Dag og hobby.
Slán go fóill.